going to make. They owed me amends. And I had a lot of whole, choice, lovely words that started with MF that went along with those people. And it was not going to happen. And she didn't fight me with that. She said, well, if I'm walking with you, you do it or see you later. Love you, mean it. Don't waste my time. And it was good that she spoke to me in that way, because I don't know that I would have heard it any other way. And, you know, she talked to me about the unity piece of this program. And unity was about convenience to me. That's how I conducted myself in Alcoholics Anonymous. I showed up late. I would leave early sometimes. I was at my home group. That was not a committed meeting to me unless I was there, unless I was really tired. Or I had something better to do, something better came up. And she told me, she goes, you will be there unless you are dead sick or out of town. And I'm like, that's harsh. And she goes, and when I say sick, I mean sick. Not any of this mamby-pamby stuff you like to pull. And she had me nailed, because I like mamby-pamby. I don't feel good today. You know, I hurt today. You know, what's my favorite ailment, you know? And she said, you know, how are you being of service to Alcoholics Anonymous? Are you a taker in AA? And, hell yeah, I'm a taker in AA. Yeah, I am. What do you? I give when it's convenient to me. Are you willing to be inconvenienced by Alcoholics Anonymous? Are you willing to be inconvenienced by the newcomer? So I was so desperate. Thank God for desperation. I said, I will go anywhere and do anything that you're asking me to do. And she says, well, we're going to start at the beginning, and where it says write, we're going to write. When it says pray, we're going to pray. When it asks a question, we're going to answer it. When it says go here and do that, we're going to go there and do that. And that's the deal. Are you willing? And I said, yes, I am. And so I started taking the steps out of the big book ever since then. And it changed my life. So that's the message that I carry today. She had me do a lot of things that I didn't understand and I didn't agree with. You know, and one of the things that she said to me, she goes, well, Val, you know, they're not lying in the big book. What they're saying in there is true. You know, Valerie, and she put it in terms that I could understand. If it said that sleeping with newcomers was a great way to gain spirituality, it'd be in there, wouldn't it? But it's not, because it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So she put it in terms I could understand. She had me nailed. So, and my life was a train wreck. I didn't know how to live at all. I mean, unmanageability everywhere. And very angry. And I was telling Tom, I'm happy to report that I haven't had the cops called on me in a long time. Because if you pissed me off, I'd go after you physically. And I'm, you know, something that Don used to say, I'm just not capable of doing that anymore. I couldn't do that even if I wanted to. And that's absolutely God changing me. Because that's how I handled anger ever since I can remember. If you made me mad, I was coming to get you. And I saw real value in that. One of the things that I love about our 4-step is that I can't fool myself about the value of my character defects anymore. And with my anger, for a long time, I still had a lot of value with that. And because it kept you off balance. And if I scared you bad enough, you'd do what I wanted you to do. It'd keep you away from me. If I needed to get you away from me, I could get my way with it. And where I hit bottom with that is I was around 7 years sober, and I was at my home group. And there was a woman who came in, and it was a closed discussion meeting. And she was introducing herself as an addict. And it was my duty after the meeting, being little Miss AA that I have now graduated to, because I am armed. facts now. I'm dangerous. You know what I'm saying? I know something now. I'm on fire. And truly, it was like I became a little, I hate to use the term, but it's true. I mean, that's how I was labeled too. I became a big book Nazi. And hate to use that word, but you get the picture. Big book thumper. I was a thumper. And anyway, so this gal says to me, and the traditions too, and I'm laying down the AA law, and I'm coming after the people that are trying to destroy AA, and I'm going to save them. I'm going to set them straight. So I was on a mission. And anyway, so this gal, she introduced herself as an addict in the meeting. It's a closed meeting of AA, so after the meeting, I thought it was my personal responsibility as a good home group member to go up and inform her of her error. And so I go up and I say something to her, and she says, are you the AA police? You can't tell me what to do. I can come into this meeting and I can do whatever I want. I'm like, are you talking to me right now? Are you talking to me? And she went on, and I mean, I was like a peacock. It just went, whoosh. And I was mad. And then it began, where I'm going to rip off your top part, except I was voicing it very loud. I'm going to rip it off and shove it up your bottom part. Other home group members are running around. Little kids are running around because we have babysitting at our meeting. People that came to visit the meeting that were trying to get off the ground. And it's a big book meeting, which was like, taboo in Richmond for a very long time. We didn't talk about that stuff. So we got people visiting, trying to check it out. And that's the example of solid big book AA that I'm demonstrating. And I mean, I'm yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs and cussing up one side and down the other. And then the guy that brought her, I get a hold of him and I'm yelling and screaming at him and ripping him a new one and just going to town. And I don't know who stopped me, but I got separated from that situation and went into the bathroom to pray. And I knew right away I was wrong, knew right away. And I made amends right away. And I went back out there, and she has never come back to that meeting. The guy has come back with his new woman, and he stays far away from me. And I've talked to him several times since then, and just, I was dead wrong. What can I do? Is there anything I can do to make it right? I scared the bejesus out of him. And I'm lucky they didn't call the cops that night. I really am. And I had to get up in the morning and make amends to the parents and the home group members. And I was in bad shape with that. I paid an awful price with that, spiritually and emotionally, and I haven't had that since. And I'll never forget calling Don the next day, and the only thing that he asked me was, "Why were you so threatened?" And that's a great question to ask. When I'm ready to go to war, why am I so threatened? Because I like going to war. War is fun. I can get a lot of power out of going to war, especially if I think I'm right. So that was, and I've never forgotten that question, and I ask that of myself frequently. Why do I feel so threatened right now? What's going on? Is it break time yet?
Yes.
It's break time! Yay! Smokers Tribe. Well, I have no idea what to say now. Where do you start? And I'm just praying and asking that my Creator guide me and direct me. Do we have a question from the crowd?
You were going to tell us why you were threatened.
Oh, I was?
Yes.
Well, what came out of that is I was afraid that I was doing it wrong. I was afraid I was wrong, and that she was right. And my beliefs and convictions were so new. I was so very fragile with them, I think. And anybody that questioned me on my newfound fire and passion, I would automatically get into an argument with them and defend my experience, or actually it was my newfound knowledge. And so I think that was a large part of it, was what if I'm wrong? And I didn't like it. I didn't know what to do when people disagreed. All I knew how to do was go to war if you disagreed with me. And very invested in being right. And that little saying around AA, I thought was just complete hooey. You know, would you rather be right or happy? And I'm like, what kind of choice is that? You know, I mean, that made no sense to me whatsoever. I thought that was pretty mamby-pamby response. Something that my current sponsor today, Jerry, said to me, I don't know what I had my knickers in a twist about, but I was probably defending something. And he said, Valerie, what I have learned is that everybody's right. Everybody's right. Even when they're wrong. I was like, whoa. That's true. And I like that, even when they're wrong, because I want to hang my hat on that, you know, because I still got a little oomph there. But more and more I see how true that is, we really do cease fighting anything or anyone. Which is paramount for somebody like me, to cease fighting. And every time I have ceased fighting, it's always worked out fine. And usually in ways that I didn't expect, and better than anything I could have planned. I used to hate to hear that too. God's will for you is better than anything you could have planned. And I remember too, I used to have some real issues with the spiritual way of life, or with this God reliance thing. And I was very afraid of God. And I remember calling Dawn up one time, and I was very uptight, you know, very rigid kind of a girl. And I don't remember what was going on. All I knew was that I was praying, and I wanted relief from my mind and from my emotions, because they were on me like this. I couldn't get them off. So I'm praying, and I'm afraid that I'm praying wrong. I want to pray just right. I got to say it perfectly, or I'm going to get no relief. And I called him up, and I said, I'm praying, and it's not working. You know, this stuff, you know, you seem to have some kind of special connection to God. I do not have that. And he said, well, Valerie, and I've been through the steps by this point several times, out of our big book. And so I was surprised to find myself in this place, and I was surprised at what came out of my mouth, actually, because intellectually I knew differently. But out of my mouth, he goes, well, what are you praying to? Tell me about what you're praying to. Tell me about your conception of God. And I said, God is punishing, and God is vindictive. And if you don't do this spiritual stuff just right, you're never going to go anywhere, and you're never going to be happy. And you got to suffer for God, and you got to suffer for a spiritual way of life. I mean, just like blah, all this stuff came out, and it was not a good story, you know. And he said to me, he said, Valerie, you've got God set up as a version of you. And I was like, wow, that's a low blow. Thanks. But that was true, because I am all of those things. I am vindictive, punishing, play favorites. Like, I thought there were the haves and the have-nots in the spiritual life, and I would always be a have-not. I would always be somebody who was struggling with this spiritual answer. I would never get it. And, you know, I'd hear these great speakers that I just adored in Alcoholics Anonymous who seemed to get it. And I just used to, you know, judge them, because I wanted what they had, but I didn't understand how they got that, and I thought it will happen for them, but it's never going to happen for me. And then, Camille said to me, well, are you willing to do what they have done? If you want what they have, are you willing to do what they have done? And also, I was never happy where I was at. When I was 2 years sober, I wanted to be 20 years sober. When I was 5 years sober, I wanted to be 25 years sober. Not comfortable at all where I'm at currently today. I always wanted to be somewhere different and better. In my mind, it was different and better. Now I understand a little bit more about the journey and being present in today. And also today, very grateful for my character defects. And not afraid of suffering at all. And that's a complete change for someone like me, because I would try to control my experience in my life to insulate myself from that stuff. And because I want to feel good all the time. Unless I'm on a tear. If I'm on a tear, the worse I feel, the better, and I like to nurse it. And I like to feed it. Feel some misery with it, go down dark with it. Go on to lockdown, you know what I mean? And I can find power in that too. Love to be the victim of my own mind, and woe is me. It's a son of a bitch being me, you know what I mean? So full of shit. And but anyway, so I don't fear suffering at all, and not that I'm asking for any to be delivered, but when it comes, it's okay. I know that there is another side to that, and I don't care when it shows up. I'm not attached to a time frame anymore. Like I'd be like watching, waiting. I don't feel better today. I don't feel better today. When's this going to get better? I'm working with newcomers. When's it going to get better? I'm throwing myself into AA. When's it going to get better? All that stuff that we get told to do. Oh, go find a newcomer. Get your head out of your buttocks. Go work with a newbie, Go pick up some drunk and take them to the meeting. Do you have inventory to write? Do you have, whatever? Do you have unfinished amends? I mean, I can get so wound tight with, have I done this perfectly? Because I shouldn't be feeling this. I'm feeling this, so something's wrong. And going into a mental whirlwind. My friend calls it a psychic shitstorm. And I like that. That describes it perfectly. So today, I just don't fight with that much anymore. And I have my faith has changed. One of the things that I love in the We Agnostics, where it talks about we have to make that step from bridge to shore. And for me, what that meant is I had to leave my mind and what I knew, and really start to trust this voice that was starting to talk to me within. Because it was starting to happen. And all my life I had been running from that. Running. And then it got so bad where it was just completely shut off. Where it was gone. And I come back into AA and it starts to open up a little bit more. I start to have a conscience again. I can't do the same things that I used to be able to do. And it was frightening for me to start trusting that. And I remember, too, this one instance, and it kind of changed my faith and was like a stepping stone for me, where I trusted my gut and what I was being directed to do. And on paper, it was something that someone like me should not be doing. And Don used to tell me all the time, Valerie, and this had to do with work, follow your heart's desire. Do what God intended you to do. We all have a contribution to make. We've all been given the gift to do it. Go do it. Well, I can't do that. I dropped out of high school. You got to be educated to go do this. There's no way it's going to work out. At that point, Camille had made me go back and get my GED in sobriety. I had dropped out of high school a long time ago. And but Don said, this is about the world of the spirit. And I don't care what you think you know about this. Because I shared with him about what was going on in my gut. And it was to go teach. And I couldn't go teach because I didn't have a college education. So my next option was to be a trainer. And so I started interviewing these trainers and finding out what they did and all this stuff, and doing some volunteer training in correctional facilities. Now that's a joke. I have to tell you about that. I digress for 1 second. But it was a good thing, because then we got a meeting started in the jail. So I did this volunteer training, and I go in to do this training, and it's about with offenders. It's moral psychology. If you help them to understand the consequences of their behavior and the impact that it has on other people, they will go forth and never sin again. And I'm reading this stuff going, this is a crock of poo. I can't train this. We're starting a meeting in here. Because most of the people that were in that room were addicts and alcoholics. And I just could not, in good conscience, continue on with that training. So we started a meeting. And I didn't do that training. And but anyway, but I was willing to put myself out there. I was willing to follow my gut. And everything in the world told me, you can't do it. People in the world said, it can't be done. You don't have an education. You have no experience. And Don said, yeah, whatever. Put it together and send it out. Put together your skills and send it out. And I did, and I got a job 2 weeks later. I couldn't believe it. And making more money than I'd ever made in my life, and I was making it honestly, which was a different experience for me. And I was learning how to become self-supporting through my own contributions. All my life I've been a thief. In every way that you can be a thief. I stole from everybody. I was an equal opportunity thief. I didn't care. I'd steal from anybody under any circumstances at any time, and I did. So anyway, so I've grown up in AA, I guess, and learned how to become self-supporting through my own contributions, like pay my bills, not be a spiritual thief, not be an emotional thief. You know, I used to go to people, tell me what to think, tell me what to believe, you know, all that stuff. You know, and thank God for strong sponsorship that said, you know what, you go figure it out and let me know. And I don't mean that to say that I didn't get strong direction. I got very strong direction. But like they knew when to let me go. They knew that line. And I think as a sponsor, you know, it's a conversation that I have with Jerry. You know, when am I giving direction, and then when am I trying to run their life? And sometimes it seems like a very fine line, which requires so much prayer, which is good. Good thing about sponsorship, the little shits will make you pray. That probably wasn't very nice, was it? But it's true, you know. But I went off on a tangent. So anyway, that was like a turn for me, that trusting God was good, that trusting God was okay, that really what God has planned for me really is it's better than anything I can come up with. It really is. And so I don't fear God's will anymore. I used to be afraid of God's will. It's like, oh my God, it means I'm going to have to never have sex again in my life. I'm going to have to be a nun in South America and be poor. That was my vision of doing God's will. It was bad, you know? And I'm like, what an order, I can't go. And, you know, and Don said to me, is it possible that maybe God's already got somebody going down there doing that? And if you were directed to do that it would be okay. And my God, that sounds better than what you got going on anyway right now. You know? Which was true. So my recovery life has been all over the map. A lot of different things, which I guess we'll talk more about tomorrow when we start to get into the steps a little bit more deeply. And is everybody tired or not tired? You want me to keep going? I'm trying to, because it's Friday. I'm fine. I can keep going. Keep going? Okay. Well, y'all leave if you're tired, right? When the room starts to thin, I'll shut up. So what else? Is anybody here questioning whether they're an alcoholic? Leo's going. If Leo's going, it's time to go. You just hurt my feelings. I'm kidding. Is anybody here not clear on whether they're an alcoholic or questioning that? Does everybody think it's okay to question whether you're an alcoholic? Yes. Sweet. See, y'all are like on the page. Actually, I think it's time to stop because I'm done on the inside. It's done. It's quiet. There's nothing else coming. So I'm done. And telling stories and stuff. And just about our alcoholic mind, or our mind that is just unbelievably insane. And the stuff that we come up with that really seems like a good idea. It's always entertaining until we go to jail. But anyway, so really excited about being here. It's just really neat. It's really neat, and it's neat to be with AA family out west that I didn't know really well yet. And I run around a lot on the East Coast, and it's been really neat, and getting to spend time with you guys out here. And AA has become my family. I never fit in anywhere else. I desperately tried to and wanted to, but I never fit in anywhere else. I was always very awkward and never really fit in with a group. And I would move from group of people to group of people to group of people, either by the consequence of my actions. I wear out my welcome in a group. And I was just weird. I was just strange. And always doing and saying the wrong thing. And their things would go missing. So, just not a very nice person at all. And just very awkward. And when I got into AA, and started to recover and started to get well and really started to be a part of this incredible fellowship that we have, and started to be a member of life. And it was because of what happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I go to work today, I don't feel like odd man out. I don't feel separated from everybody. When I'm with my family and they're all lunatics, I don't feel like odd man out, or that I have to change them or whatever. And I'll talk more about that, and that's just because of what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. And I found that first here, that sense of understanding and acceptance, and then being shown a way to live that I just could not find before. And the only place I ever got relief from all the uncomfortability was, of course, through alcohol. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my experience with these steps. When I got sober this last time, I was really desperate and willing to go to any length. And this is crazy, but if people had told me, Valerie, if you go stand in the corner on your head and that's going to keep you sober, I would have done it. I had gotten to that point where I was willing to go anywhere, do anything, if it meant that I didn't have to be me anymore, or lead the life that I was leading. I was married at that time. My son was 2. My life was very ugly, but on the outside it looked great. My first husband made pretty good money, but I was not a good wife. I was not a good mother. I was one of those women that would drop their kid off and say, I'll be back in a couple hours, and not come back. I'd come back when I was done drinking. And sometimes that'd be 10 hours later, sometimes it'd be a day and a half later, sometimes I'd only be an hour late. But once I started drinking, something happened where I had to keep drinking. And again, I don't care what the price is I have to pay. That I just don't care. And that's the point I got to. I really didn't care. And I would show remorse if it was fitting. If I could get you off my back. When I would get into arguments with Steve, who was my first husband, about my drinking and stuff, and come home, be a good wife. This isn't what I signed up for. I'd do whatever I had to do to appease him so I could go out and do what I wanted to do. And I did exactly what I wanted to do. I absolutely did not consider other people or the harm I was causing him or my son at all. That's not a nice person. And for a long time I had this delusion that I was a nice person, that I was a good person. And I'm not. Left on my own steam, I am not a kind person at all. I will be like the tornado, like our book talks about, running through your life. As a matter of fact, when I went to go make amends to him, he told me, he goes, Valerie, that 4 years I was with you were the worst 4 years of my life. That's not a stunning recommendation, you know what I mean? Because we run through people's lives and create all kinds of damage, and then completely arrogant about it. Like, get over it. Get over it. And I really used to feel that way and think that way. Get over it. I've been appropriately sorry. I've been appropriately remorseful. Get over it. And getting mad at you for still being mad at me. That's what I love, when we're new and we come into AA. It's like, God, I've been sober a whole 3 months and they don't trust me. They still won't talk to me. We're such idiots with that stuff. And it took 5 years before my mom, I think, really believed that I was sober and not going to take something from her. And that's been an incredible demonstration in my family. But so when I got here, I was really willing. And I got a sponsor, and I told you about that last night. She got committed. And then I got another gal who ended up not being an alcoholic. She ended up leaving Alcoholics Anonymous. Her name was Joanne. She was just having a rough patch. And she came into AA. And, just a small suicide attempt. And with some booze involved. But she wasn't one of us. She was just having a rough patch. But she was in AA and running around, and she sponsored me for a while and called her every day, and I thought she was an alcoholic because she told me she was. And she took me through the steps out of Hazleton. About 9 months sober, I lost my mind and started bouncing off the walls really, really bad. And I had left Steve. Once I sobered up, I left my first husband. I left him. And started doing some construction work and cleaning houses and stuff. I didn't know anything about living in the world at all. I didn't know how to pay bills, do a checkbooking and that stuff, because I always found somebody to take care of me. So I didn't know anything about that, like paying rent and paying it on time, and you get in trouble if you don't. That kind of stuff, that I have to actually be responsible for a car and making sure it's legal. I had no clue about that stuff. I'm happy to report that my car is completely legal today. All speeding tickets have been paid. That's for a long time. Nothing was legal. I didn't pay my tickets. When I left California, and this was sober before, well, my friend in North Carolina calls it sobriety. I'm sober, but I'm dry, sobriety. But when I left California, when I was sober for that 3.5 years, I think I had 13 warrants out for my arrest when I left that I had racked up stark raving sober. and just not paying attention. The rules don't apply to me. I just throw that stuff away and keep going, But anyway, I feel like Tom this morning. I'm like, here's a story, then I jump over this story, and then I go over this story. So I left Steve, and I'm learning how to live. I'm learning how to work a little bit. I'm not very good at it at all. I'm not very good at showing up on time. Still not very good at being where I'm supposed to be when I say I'm going to be there. A lot of times I don't feel like working, so I don't. You might get a call from me, you might not. But I was going to a meeting and wanted to be here. And something, sometimes I forget when I'm working with new people, and it talks about us in our, I think it's in one of the prefaces, that we are very ill when we get here. Very sick people. I don't know anybody who comes into AA on a winning streak, And AA is not known as an emotional and mental hotbed of great mental health, you know what I'm saying? So that when we get here, we're sick people. To be compassionate and to remember. So I'm 9 months sober, and I'm starting to go a little mad, and I started going to this big book meeting called The Fourth Dimension. And it got started, and they were big book thumping and all this good stuff, and it was great. I had no idea that how it works was in the big book. I'd heard it read in meetings for years, had no clue. If you want to hide something from a drunk, stick it in the big book, right? It's the last place they're ever going to look. And not a clue. So it was magic for me, because I was like, oh my God, there's directions in here. The first directions I discovered in the big book were the 11th step directions. And I started practicing those, and I just had a blast. I just had a great time, and I kind of had a spiritual experience. I did. I woke up a little bit. Before, where God was very nebulous, and it's like, yeah, God, whatever. I'll pray because you tell me to. I had an experience, and it was like, God is here. It was like a big blinking sign. It's like I woke up inside, that there was something going on here. Got excited about AA, got excited that there were these directions in there, and just started on that path and being a member of that home group. And I had, at that time too, I had switched sponsors again because Joanne had gone out, and that sponsorship line that I was in was very, very big on commitment. And that's where I really started to learn about respect for Alcoholics Anonymous, and being committed in AA. That's when those ideas started being introduced to me. And I didn't fully surrender to those because they were a tad inconvenient, but I started to hear that message, and was held somewhat accountable to that stuff. So I'm going along in sobriety, and of course I've gotten into a relationship, and he's the one. And it is absolutely God's will. We've been on 2 dates. We've slept together, of course, and it was magic, and he understands me. And I think I even said to my sponsor at the time, Nancy, I know it's God's will. I know God's direction, because we just connected. And I've never had sex like that before in my life. And I'm sure she was like, yeah, whatever. But I'm glad that nobody can see that on tape, what I just did. But anyway, and she had been around, so she was laughing. It was funny. But we really believe that. We really believe that this is God's will. And so I got into this relationship, and it was insane. Of course, we moved in with each other right away. With that joke, with you get 2 alcoholics together, at the end of the first day, do you say the Lord's Prayer, or do you pack up the U-Haul, and move in? We packed up the U-Haul, and he was at home living with his mama and daddy. And I'm like trying to learn how to live, can barely pay rent, and I mean, it was crazy. It was insane. But it seemed like a great idea at the time. And, and we're different. I listened to other people's experience in AA, and I listened to my sponsor's experience, and I'm different. And I remember thinking that I am different. What you're saying does not apply to me. I'm going to do it different. I'm listening to all the mistakes you made. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it different because this is true love. True love. And so anyway, disaster. Disaster ensues. Why? Because I don't have a relationship with God. It's brand new. It's just a baby. Just a baby relationship. And of course, this man becomes my higher power. And I start worshiping at the altar of Alex. And get very sick. I start missing out on my commitments in AA. Start getting into arguments, so I don't go to the meeting, or I don't talk to that new girl because we're arguing. That's more important, that we get this thing resolved. And it never got resolved that way, ever. So just a lot, just crazy time. And then, the big dramatic breakups. Well, I'm going to go find some strange because I'm mad at you, because I like to retaliate. So I'll go back to what I know. I'll just go find me a new boyfriend. That'll show you. And I might do it so you can catch me, and I might not, Want to keep you off balance so you never know really what's going on. Because that's how I like to maintain control. And it's just insane. And having a hard time working, and because that becomes paramount in my life. That becomes the all-important thing. So I hit around 3 years. It's another breakup. It's nasty. It's ugly, and I hit another bottom in AA. And it was good. It's the most painful thing I've ever gone through in sobriety. And it took me a while. Sometimes I even hate to talk about how long it took me to come out of that. And a lot of the reason why is because I added to it by the bucket load. But it was the turning point in my sobriety, and I am forever grateful for all of that stuff that went down at that time. So at that time, the sponsorship that I was involved in was about a meeting every day. Didn't really do the big book. It was about go find a new drunk and carry him to a meeting, and write me a letter once a week and let me know what's going on. And I started stealing in earnest again. I started going to work and say I was working for a film producer at the time, and I said, well, I'm going to go into D.C. and make some calls on some prospective clients. He did corporate films and stuff. Try to find some, and then I'd just go home and get in bed, not go to work. And I talked about that a little bit last night. I eventually stopped working, couldn't work. Everybody in AA that I knew, my behavior became so bizarre that I was disowned by everyone I knew in AA. Stay away from me. I started getting, my anger started showing up in earnest. Small anger problem, small one. I wasn't welcome at the Rebo Center, the Sober Center. It was just a really ugly time. It was a really painful time. And he had left, and he had started dating someone else. Oh, I know, that's a bad one. So what's our natural response? I will stalk you. So, how I added to that was, by hiding behind bushes and underneath cars and vandalizing his things and scaring him. I mean, I It's a true story. And I mean, he told me later, he's like, I was afraid. He goes, I didn't know what you were going to do. He goes, it was terrifying. I didn't know what you were going to do, what you were capable of doing. You were so weird. I mean, I had like bad vibes coming off of me. I'd go into the meetings where him and that girl were, and I'd just like stare hate, and hope that they were feeling it, because I had been wronged, and I was like the bad person. I was like the crazy person, and then he was the angel, and I'm like, you're all wrong, and I wanted to show him what a, whatever. I wanted to prove to them, to everybody in AA, that he was bad, and I was the victim, and how can y'all do this to me? And it was just crazy. And then I met Camille, and literally the woman saved my life. If I hadn't have met her, I know I'd be drunk or dead. No question in my mind. No question. Because that's where I was headed. Because I got very angry at AA and very angry at God. I didn't understand why all that was happening to me. I thought God was punishing me. I thought that AA didn't work, that all you guys were a bunch of hypocrites, that you guys didn't walk what you talked, that I was in real trouble and you weren't helping me. You were just standing back there judging me. And I was in real trouble. And I tell you, Camille likes the crazy ones, I guess, because she just scooped me up. And she didn't pat me on the tutu or anything. She told me, you're going to die. You're in real trouble. And there's some real work that we got to do here. So I became willing to do what she asked me to do, and she laid it out clearly.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up, as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day. Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
My name is Mary, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm so grateful to be here and grateful to be sober. My dry date is the 10th of August, 1984. My group is a Markham Village group in Markham, Ontario. And I'm a very, very grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, Lee. I'd like to thank Alexa so much. This is the third time she has been my hostess, picking me up. Usually, they last about one time. But she's wonderful, and she would do anything that I asked her to. So thank you very much. I'm basically non-demanding. And ask my husbands. And I would like to thank everybody and anybody who had absolutely anything to do with putting on this wonderful event, because it is truly a wonderful event. And, it doesn't matter where I go speaking in the world, I always hear about State Line. And it takes a lot to put in this. And a lot of little people out there that you don't see and you don't realize that they're contributing to this. So I would just like to thank you. And I think they deserve a thank you from all of us. And I'd like to thank Sharon and Ralph for their wonderful talks last night, hearing their stories. Thank you. Amazing. And to Rick, my Al-Anon friend, you just are so wonderful. I just identify with you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. And for Lee, who gave that wonderful presentation on the history. So I think I've thanked about everybody. I want to thank God and Bill and Bob for this wonderful program we've given. You know, when I came in today, Lee had put on Bob Marley, "Get up, stand up, fight for your rights," you know. And I used to live in Jamaica, and he was one of my guys. He didn't like me, and I didn't like him, but I liked what he did. You know, I liked what he did. And I've been very much like that since I've been a child. I've always wanted something to believe in. Maybe it's my Irish-Scottish ancestry. You know, I don't know, but I've had various things that I used to fight for when I was young. You know, at age 14, I was boycotting South African grapes and getting into a lot of trouble. From then, I was an activist in some other groups. When I was nursing, I got in with a group of anti-apartheid people who had come over to study from South Africa. I got very involved with them and got into a lot of trouble. And when I was with British Airways, I went to South Africa, and they wanted me to separate the children in Johannesburg. They've got two signs that says Blanca and non-Blanca. And as soon as they got off these kids that I was bringing on the lollipop specials from all the schools in England, as soon as we landed in Johannesburg, they wanted me to separate the kids, and I absolutely refused to do that. I didn't want any part of it. So I've always wanted something to believe in. And these traditions, I feel this way. I feel that Bill, you know, he calls us benign anarchists. And I truly believe that when Bill formulated these and called them the traditions, he absolutely knew what he was doing. When I was an early member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and just so grateful to be here, and I had no argument with anything. I had no argument with the steps. I had no argument with the traditions. I had no argument about basically anything I was asked to do in this program, until I got a little weller. But as regards sponsorship directions, but I never had any problem with the traditions. And I remember when they told me at 6 months I could start to have a position, I asked them if there was such a position as a tradition upholder. So somebody said to me, I didn't know if the old-timers, I used to believe everything they said. The old-timer said to me, well, we don't have a tradition upholder, but we have the AA police. And I asked how I could join. So I basically set up my own. And you know, we had a little history today from Lee, who did a wonderful job. And I've got a little here. And some of the stuff I'm going to be reading from and sharing with you is my own experience with the group and the traditions, but also kind of how we evolved. You know, he spoke about the Washington Post article. I think it was after that was published, membership grew from 20 to 80,000. I mean, that's a lot of people. And if you can imagine, there was absolutely no rules, no regulations, nothing. All we had is people who started groups, and they would impose their own set of rules. And if you did not conform to those rules, you would be expelled from the group. And those rules were overreaching. I mean, they went from everything to Irish, non-Irish, non-blacks, non-Catholics, all Protestants, a certain way of behaving and dressing. You had the old boys club. At first, Dr. Bob really didn't want to have women. You can tell from his haircut he wasn't a 13-stepper. And I love Bob's haircut. And I can imagine his wife doing it to him when he was drunk, just to get back at him. So, Headquarters New York started receiving all these letters. about the problems they were having. And the 12 traditions has evolved out of all these problems. Every problem that there ever was, and that we still can have today, when people want to ignore the traditions, it's all been covered. There is no avenue you can think of that we can go into that hasn't been covered by the traditions. Because you see, Bill was an alcoholic, and Bill knew about the cunning alcoholic mind. The alcoholic mind that is always looking somehow to get it my way. That ego that keeps resurfacing in all of us. And it can do so much damage to a group. I do not understand why people want to change Alcoholics Anonymous. And there are a lot of movements afloat that would like to change Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know why. Because really, what else have we got? What is the success rate for any other? I mean, look at the Washingtonians. The Washingtonians, 1840s, 6 drunks sitting in a bar in Baltimore, Maryland. They want to stay sober. So they decide that they're going to meet and help each other to stay sober. That was it, stay sober. And in a few years, the movement was so big, it had gone to, well, there's varying arguments about what it went to, but some say it went to almost 600,000 members. But you see, that's because they didn't have any singleness of purpose. That is because they get into the field of politics, the suffragette movement, money. They became very interested in money. They became interested in publicity. And the fact was they had no spiritual base. They didn't have a spiritual program. And when you think about it, in a few short years, there's none of them left. They were all gone. They were all drunk, hopeless. That was a massive movement. And when Bill received all these letters, he came to the astonishing conclusion that if all of these membership rules were adhered to, 9/10 of the membership wouldn't be allowed in the rooms. When he gathered them all together. Now, there's a lot of alcoholics in here. Can you imagine if it was your group way back in the early days? Just think about how you'd run it. Before you'd done the 12 steps. Scary, isn't it? Because we have that mind that wants to control. So the idea for the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous came directly from all the correspondence that was generated after the Washington Post article. And Alcoholics Anonymous was actually breaking apart. And that is when that member in 1945, I think CHK from Michigan, he wrote an article about the Washingtonians. And it really affected Bill and Bob very, very much. And they set to work going around and talking to people in the groups. And of course, they were not well received. Because, you know, it's my sponsor, Clancy, my beloved sponsor, you know, he used to say that when he was drinking, he'd stand and he'd beat his fist. And he'd say, justice, justice for all mankind. And then at the end it was mercy, mercy, you know. And that's what all these members were like. The justice, justice, do it my way. Justice, justice, I want it my way because I started the group. It's my group. And it'll go the way I want it to go. And they didn't want rules. They absolutely refused to have rules. So that is why it's not called rules and why it's called traditions. Because I think there's something deep, deep within our motley little hearts, alcoholics of my type, that like the word traditions. I come from an old country. I was brought up on Celtic Gaelic traditions. I mean, some of them are bizarre in the light of day. You know, I mean, I've still got an aunt talks to the fairies, you know, and but they're entrenched in people. These traditions are entrenched in people. And that's what the word traditions does. The minute you think about it, that brilliant word, it becomes entrenched within you. So it's another stroke of genius. As was said, I think, I can't remember who said it, but Bill published them first. He used a grapevine as his vehicle to publish the traditions. Because that way there was nobody shouting at him from groups. You know, they were still asking Bob to come and speak, but they were saying in a little note to him or the phone call, whatever, come and tell us about where you used to hide the bottles. Come and tell us about your drinking sprees, but don't talk about those damn traditions. So if he put them out in writing form, then they would be read. Even if it was to be read and put aside, they'd be read. Because alcoholics, if you're a good alcoholic, you want to be informed about the topic of the day. You just have to go to a business meeting to see that. So, it was called 12 Points to Assure Our Future. And that's certainly what these traditions have done. They have, please God, will go on to assure our future. And you know, the groups that were really in trouble took them very seriously because they understood and were afraid. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us. We become afraid. And that's why you see sometimes, you know, the discordance that you see in groups between people. The fear and the paranoia that can overcome us when we think about this thing slowly collapsing the way the Washingtonians. And we are fearful people. We are fearful people. No matter how long we're sober, at least, you know, to everything I know, being around here for 35 years, no matter how long we're sober, no matter, you know, how old we get, you know, there's a few things that never ever quite go away. Emotional immaturity, deep sensitivity, and fear. And when I'm in fear about something happening to Alcoholics Anonymous, I will get into my neurosis and then I'll get into my paranoia. And then it becomes my obsession of the mind. So I'll start doing a little circle of the groups in my area to make sure they're all adherent to the traditions. It's like, here she comes, you know. And Bill presented the traditions at the AA convention in Cleveland in 1950, the first one. That's where he, and Dr. Bob was there as well. And I'm so happy that Dr. Bob was alive to okay these traditions, because can you imagine what would go on if it was just Bill had passed these traditions? Because, you know, AA is more or less, even today, divided into two camps. You know, you have the Akronites, you have the people out there, and then you have the people in New York and further on, you know, the Wilsonians and the Smithsonians, if you like. And each one thinks that their hero is better than the other one. And Dr. Bob died in the November after these were published. So what are the 12 traditions? Well, they are to group survival and harmony what the 12 steps are to our survival. And without them, we will surely die. Because, you see, if I don't do the 12 steps and adhere to the 12 steps and keep in good spiritual condition according to the 12 steps, then I will surely die. If I don't physically die, I will certainly die spiritually. But if we don't uphold the 12 traditions, then there'll be nothing left of us. Tradition 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. What does that really mean? It's how to best work and live together. Because that unity that we feel in the rooms is everything. Have you ever been in a group, at a business meeting, at a speaker meeting, when you've sat in the rooms and you're worried about the unity? Anybody? Show me hands. That's a lot of people. And I don't have time to ask you all individually what that particular thing was about. But I hope that as I go on here, I'll cover some of the things that can cause that feeling. Or let me talk for me. Certainly cause them for me and for my sponsees who call me about them. So it's a principle of humility rather than rebellion. Again, growing up, I used to think that I was a female Braveheart. You know, and I used to even go up to the Highlands where he used to run about, and I'd run around shouting all the rubbish. I just didn't have any blue paint. And I understand this completely now. That I was always a rebel until alcohol took away everything I had. When I came in these doors, I had nothing left. I'm talking nothing. There was I didn't even have any humanity left when I came in these doors. Nothing. Barely. I had nothing. Nothing. My rebellion had been completely taken out of me by the demon alcohol, as my granny used to call it. Every facet and part of me had been erased. And I came in here with humility. I came in here realizing that for the first time in my life, I could admit that I knew nothing about living. Nothing. I thought I knew about love, but my beloved children were taken away. So, was that love? Everything was gone. When they told me I just had to be a small part of the great whole, I was amazed that they'd even want to have me. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I came in here, I was not looking good. I mean, my old sponsee, I said to her once, you know, Carol, a lot of my sponsees are being 13-stepped. I was never 13-stepped. She said, do you remember what you looked like when you came in? She said you had Jake leg. We used to take you to meetings in a cart. So this group has to survive, or the group has to survive, or the individual will not. It's really that simple. My personal ambitions, no matter what, have to be set aside. If this thing is something that I honor and treasure and feel honored to be a part of, then all I'm asked to do is to keep these traditions. And the perspective that I get from sitting in the meeting, the perspective I get from being in a group discussion, and from listening to other people, because I have learned to listen and respect, That lets me see who I really am. And that lets me see how much I need a leash. How much I need a leash. Because being the activist that I used to be, and then going to where I was, and two extremes, and then coming in these rooms and see what is being offered to me, that our personal recovery depends on AA unity. I realized I wanted to be in middle ground. I wanted to be in the middle ground. I wanted to be able to think about what is best for Alcoholics Anonymous. Not me. One more time, it's not about me, it's about you. Tradition 2. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. I love that. I love that. The example I have to give you. I lived, in sobriety, I lived in another country, a couple of countries, just for a little while. And one of those, there was a guy had set up a meeting in his basement, and it was called his first name, so-and-so's meeting. And I went to this meeting because there wasn't many meetings where I was. And he would always chair the meeting. He would announce, this is Godzilla's meeting. And he'd ask the same people to read every week. So, not being in fit spiritual condition one day, I went to him and I questioned this. And I told him, if none of us get to speak and participate, how are we going to deal with our alcoholism? He said, well, how long are you sober? And I told him, he said, listen, I'm in the medical profession. What you think is alcoholism is just little bits of alcohol still stranded in your psyche. What? Little bits of alcohol still stranded in my psyche? So we had a little disagreement. And then he told me he was going up to the States to this medical conference that was going on, and he was going to hear a guy who was coming to speak, and he would bring me back these CDs. And I used to say to him, why don't you listen to Clancy talking about alcoholism? That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He'd never, he didn't want to hear Clancy. So, anyway, he comes back from the medical convention in Florida, and I went to him and I said, so where are the CDs? I'm looking for the CDs. I want to hear what this guy had to say. He said, oh, forget it. It wasn't any good. The next day I called Clancy. He says, I just got back from Miami speaking at a medical conference. Of course, I went armed with a few facts. The wisdom of rotation and democracy. I joined a group a few years ago. I had been at one group for many, many, many years, and then I changed. And I joined another group, and when I went to that group, they had a similar setup, although it wasn't called his group. But he would chair all the meetings, and he would pick the people who had to do what they were doing. And some of my friends started coming and joined the group, and, we went to the business meeting. And we sat down and we spoke about this, we spoke about the spirit of rotation. And it did not go down well. But eventually, to be honest with you, they just didn't really know about it. They didn't apply it. And a lot of times you will see that that is ignorance too. Now, it might be ignorance that they want to keep and cultivate for their own selfish egos, I don't know. But now that group has changed completely and we're on the spirit of rotation. And you know, what this reminds me too is that the trial and error has come about knowing that every group has defects. There is no perfect group in the world. We all have defects. And you know, you might have everybody running really well and it's lovely, and then go to the next business meeting and it's a whole different story because someone's gone home and started thinking about things for a bit. And that's, you know, as you know, that's never a good idea because they get idea, bing, and they're up all night thinking about how they'll tell us about this new idea. And then when you compare it to the tradition, it just doesn't pan out. You know, and I'm not going to be reading you a lot from the 12 traditions are here for you to read. But it's important in tradition too that you think about Charlie Town's. You know, when I was watching the history there, I saw what my hero Bill Wilson went through. He had no money, and he kept having these opportunities to have money. And he just kept getting shot down, and thank God he did. And remember, too, that Charlie Towns offered him a job at Towns Hospital. And he thought that would be a great idea. But he took it back to the group, to you know, a group conscience. And he said, don't you realize you can never become a professional? Don't you always say to us that good is the enemy of best? You have to be the best there can be, Bill. You see, the group conscience is what keeps us right-sized. And we listen to it. Well, most of us do. Some of us go find another group. And, you know, as Bill put it, as the member said to him, it's a matter of life and death, Bill. And as Bill says, so spoke the group conscience. The group was right and I was wrong. The voice on the subway was not the voice of God. How often have you thought the voice of God is telling you to do something? And the group conscience doesn't agree with God. And that's what he says here. He really believed it was the voice of God telling him to do this. And he'd be prepared for professional work in AA. What a nightmare that would have been. He said, here was the true voice welling up out of my friends, out of my group conscience. I listened and thank God I obeyed. Tradition 3. I don't think there is any tradition more than this one that causes problems in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. That creates a lot of problems in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is why it's so important when you have a new member come in, that you sit down and you talk to the member and make sure that they are in the right fellowship. How many people in here have saw people died because they're in the wrong fellowship? A lot. We don't seem to understand that we hold people's lives in our hands here when we sit down and talk to them. You know, in AA, you'll have two groups. You know, again, you'll have the ones who are the zealots. I've often been accused of being a zealot, but you have the one who are the zealots, and then you'll have the other one that are love and tolerance to the extreme. Bring in anybody. This is for everybody. We can help you. It doesn't matter what your ailment is. We can help you. And that is so damaging to people. We kill people talking like that. There is no barrier to any alcoholic wishing to join Alcoholics Anonymous. None. But you have to have a desire to stop drinking. I've even met overeaters in Alcoholics Anonymous who tell me that they come because they have a desire not to drink, because they've never wanted to drink. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable how this can be manipulated. It was Dr. Bob's group, but Bill gives a great example. He says at about year 2, this is about how we incorporated that you only need a desire to drop drinking. To stop anybody is welcome. At about year 2 of the Ackham group, a poor devil came to Dr. Bob in a grievous state. He could qualify as an alcoholic, all right, but he said, Doc, I've got another real problem to tell you. I don't know if I can join AA because I'm also a sexual deviant. Well, that had to go to the group conscience. You know, Dr. Bob and his haircut, he wasn't really tolerant, I know. Probably a little shocked, you know. Up until then, anybody could say what they wanted to about who could join and who couldn't join. And the group conscience got very heated. And generally they said, this is a letter that was written in, Bill gave this talk at the General Service Conference in 1968, a talk on the traditions. Under no circumstances could we have such a card and such a disgrace amongst us, said these gentlemen. And as Bill writes us then, our destiny hung by a thread. It was on a razor edge over this single case. Could we exclude this so-called undesirability that obviously was an alcoholic, but obviously had what was called back then another problem, which we would not call today? We're talking long ago here. Who are we, considering our record? Who are we as recovering alcoholics to sit in judgment and exclusion of anybody? The bunch were sitting in Dr. Bob's living room arguing, and dear old Dr. Bob looked around and said, isn't it time, folks, to ask ourselves, what would the Master do? Bill states in the 12 and 12 that this fellow plunged into 12-step work and tirelessly carried the message. Never did he trouble anyone with his other problem. That's the beginning of how this evolved. People dealing with people, not some highfalutin concept that's sat down and thought about to keep us pure. It's from absolute experiences. Manhattan Group, 1945. You know, people didn't want to let blacks in, didn't want to let gays in, didn't want anybody to come in except the real alcoholic, who usually looked like Dr. Bob. I love Dr. Bob. So the Manhattan Group, 1945, a man came in needing help. He was black and no black members. He was also an ex-convict. All his earthly belongings were on his back. His hair was bleached blonde. He had on makeup and told us he was a dope fiend and an alcoholic. Someone called Bill. Can you imagine that conversation? So Bill, the genius of Bill, asked if he was an alcoholic. Certainly an alcoholic. So the prospect was invited to attend meetings, but just to speak about his alcoholism. Bill states that these two examples were the precedent for the third tradition. That's how it came about. That's basically how tradition 3 came about. And again, I think that today it's so important to sit down. I'll tell you a couple of examples that I've had, I've seen young people go to their death because they were in the wrong fellowship. And in fact, one just very recently who was a very young, beautiful man, very dear to my heart. It breaks my heart. A desire to stop drinking, it comes from a deep place, and it comes from a place of suffering. It comes from a place of drinking a legal beverage that I can go in and buy in any corner store, that I can see anybody go and buy anywhere, that I can see being served in every public place, on planes, everywhere. And yet if I drink it, I become crazy. Because I've proven it to myself time after time. Sitting watching drinkers and people say, just have one. Okay. And I end up with them berating me and looking down at me in disgust. And I haven't even had as much as them to drink. So that feeling of difference that we have is a feeling that everybody else, they seem to be able to drink this thing that I can't. And there's a great shame in that. And one more time it sets me about as a separate entity. I cannot have a social drink. I've never seen anybody have a little social crack. But it is that difference that makes me a separate entity. So tradition 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. That more or less basically is that if my group decides something that's only going to be held within the group, it's not breaking the tradition, it's okay. But if it's going to damage my surrounding groups, or if it's going to damage anything else in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have to go and see about it. We had an example, you've probably heard about it, where this affected, and it was one of the oldest groups in Alcoholics Anonymous decided they were going to become an atheist group. And they started putting up signs, etc., about atheists and taking down the steps and the traditions. And Intergroup went all around our groups, and we decided that we were going to delist them from the meeting book because they weren't adhering to our traditions, etc. And they were taking out the meeting book, and they took us to human rights. Yeah. And it was okay for them to take us to court on religious discrimination. And New York had to come up, and eventually we had to settle that case, and they just can't print their own formulation of the steps. That caused a lot of disunity. Bill gives the example of Middletown, a group there. They were all hot as firecrackers about it. Stargazing, the elders dreamed of innovations. They figured the town needed a great big alcoholic centre, beginning on the ground floor. Can you imagine? It would just rise to these massive heights. And there was a promoter in the deal, a super promoter. And by his eloquence, he allayed all fears. And they formulated 61 rules. To ensure foolproof continuous operation, 61 rules and regulations were adopted. Confusion replaced serenity. They want some young drunks yearn for education, doubted if they were alcoholics. Personality defects of others could be cured with a loan. A little wonder what happened. The head promoter wrote the foundation office. Then he did something else that was to become an AA classic because the group was dropping apart. It went on a little card, golf score size. The cover read, Middleton Group Number 1, Rule 62. Once the card was unfolded, a single pungent sentence leaped to the eye. Don't take yourself too seriously. And that's where Rule 62. Right. Tradition 5. Each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. AA is limited. That's why Bill starts this with the old assay, shoemaker, stick to thy last. Better to do one thing well than many badly. The only thing I know about is alcohol. I don't know about anything else. I am very limited in what I can do. I know my limitations. I now know my limitations before I accept being a sponsor, because I don't want to hurt anybody. I ask God every night, may I only ever be helpful and never hurtful. I know my limitations today. It says here, better to do one thing well than many badly. This is the central theme of the tradition. Around it, our society gathers in unity. The very life of our fellowship requires the preservation of this principle. That is a definitive statement from Bill. The very life of our fellowship. And he goes on to talk about singleness of purpose. And he also goes on to say, adhering to our singleness of purpose is a sacred trust. Sacred trust. Where else have you seen him use that? It is a sacred trust I have to keep. No matter how much I would want to deviate from it. And you know, if you want to read about singleness of purpose and what the reasons for it being true, there's a wonderful pamphlet that Bill wrote, Problems Other Than Alcohol. And in there he said there is no way to make a non-alcoholic addict into an AA member. In my group we have lots of dual addicts. Wonderful young people. Wonderful young people who have suffered horrendously from dual addiction. They never talk about their other addiction. They go to NA or CA. They may mention from the program that they also had a trouble with outside issues, but they go elsewhere, and they're wonderful, stalwart members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, there was a young fellow. Him and his wife joined AA at the same time. She was alcoholic. He said he was alcoholic because the treatment center told him to say he was alcoholic. But he wasn't. He never drank alcohol. He was a cocaine addict. Never had any desire to drink alcohol, never wanted to drink alcohol. And they both got a year medallion, they got married, and then they had a beautiful little baby. And the day of that baby's christening, his wife found him in the bathroom with his wrists slashed. He had been in and out after that 1 year. He had confided to some of us that he was not an alcoholic, but that he did not like CA. And he had been encouraged by some to just stay in AA. So you see, he did not get the identification that makes us feel all right. He did not get what he needed, and we killed him. That's how I look on it. We killed him by making people stay here that can't identify. Because that's all we have. When I listen to the speakers, I have identification. I don't have any other degrees. Bill says, Tradition 5, it has now become plain enough that only a recovered alcoholic can do much for a sick alcoholic. And it's a tremendous responsibility. An obligation so great that amounts to a sacred trust. For to our kind who suffer alcoholism, recovery is a matter of life and death. So the Society of Alcoholics Anonymous cannot, it dare not, ever be diverted from its primary purpose. That is the sacred trust that we have been given. And we do not do it to be mean. We do it to survive. We had a closed meeting the other day, and a little gal came. Her father was an alcoholic, and she was a drug addict. And it was a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when we go around the room to identify, she said that she's an addict. So we asked her if she had a desire to stop drinking. And she said she didn't drink. Now, normally in that case, we will take them outside and talk to them, and somebody will arrange to meet them the next day and take them to a meeting. Well, she had 2 years, actually, in another fellowship. But she said she had come to support her father. So we had to ask her to leave because it's a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it could have been handled very, very badly. And I have seen where it's been handled badly. And of course, some people said, well, why don't we change the format of the meeting so it can stay? But some people there were in dire need of a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We had to put the good of the group ahead of this gal who had just come to be with her father. If it was an individual choice, what would you do? Thank God for the group conscience. As Bill said, if we don't stick to these principles, we shall almost surely collapse. And if we collapse, we cannot help anyone. Therefore, I see no way of making non-alcoholic addicts into AA members. Experience says loudly that we admit no exception. If we persist in trying this, I'm afraid it will be hard on the drug user himself. Think about that. It will be hard on the drug user himself. We must accept the fact that no non-alcoholic, whatever his affliction, can be converted into an alcoholic AA member. To finish with, in the language of the heart, which I love because it's got most of Bill's essays in there, it says, reflect that we shall never be our best except when we hew only to the primary spiritual principle of Alcoholics Anonymous, that of carrying the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, and prudently cleave to its singleness of purpose. Tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Many examples of that. That group I told you about that I joined, for a long time they had been given money on behalf of our group, in the name of our group, to a place for street people downtown. This is a contribution from so-and-so group. Immediately creating an affiliation. And not only that, but using Step 7 money for an outside issue. There's been many examples I've seen in my group. For example, Christmas presents. Taking Christmas presents from our group down to the Salvation Army in the name of our group. These are all very, very worthy enterprises. But they can't continue because then we'll be affiliated. And the last thing that came up was that every year, apart from paying the rent, they decided to give a big donation to the church. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? That's not what we're about here. you want to divvy up your money, then send it to New York or send it to Intergroup, but, not the church. All these arguments that came up about endorsing finance and lending the AA name, in the early days that was a big problem because everybody wanted to jump on the AA bandwagon. Everybody. There was even liquor companies wanted to jump on the AA bandwagon. But, Bill Wright's here and here too. We of AA did dream those dreams because most alcoholics are bankrupt idealists. And then came the educational. Then came the question, is this a spiritual or a medical problem? And then there were some psychiatrists wanting to use the AA name when they were having people treating some of their patients. We do this under the AA auspices. I myself spent 4 years in and out of mental institutions. You wouldn't believe it. Treated as a manic depressive. My last entry in there, that they started changing my diagnosis. My primary diagnosis was changed from manic depressive to chronic alcoholic. And sending me to the AA meetings that came in as a separate entity to the psychiatric unit. Because the psychiatrists have told me I know nothing. The ones who are honest, just like Dr. Young said to Roland. I've heard about recoveries, but me personally, I've never seen them. And he was a very famous man. I had an example of this I'll share with you. My last husband had a massive stroke. He could never speak, he couldn't understand the spoken word. He never was able to speak again. He had severe global aphasia. It means he woke up in China. It's like he's speaking Chinese. And everybody's speaking Chinese. He doesn't speak Chinese. He could never read. It was just poor soul. He didn't have any language skills, which involves more than just words. This is a chair. John, touch your nose. He didn't know how to do any of that. And then he became very violent because he's a recovering alcoholic. He couldn't talk. So I put them in a rehabilitation center. It really was called a behavioral center. Because if he hadn't gone in there, they were going to put him in lockdown units. And I didn't want him in lockdown units. So these psychiatrists called me down and they said, we're going to do a study, Mary, based on AA and what we've learned about AA and alcohol. We realize your husband's an alcoholic and we're having trouble communicating with him, even through aphasia. It's a special way to deal with stroke patients, communication. They said, we realize you alcoholics think different. You react different. Sometimes you see things different to the rest of the world. Would you be willing to do a little psychiatric test? I said, of course. I'm 8 years sober. I'm well. So they give me this psychiatric test and 3 little books. I answer them. I turn them in. And a little while later, maybe a day, they call me and said, could I come down? They've got the results. So I go down there. And there's 3 psychiatrists sitting behind a table with a tape recorder. And when I go in and sit down, they said, we've had the results of the test. We have a question to ask you. I said, yes. They said, who's looking after you now? I said, nobody. They said, what medication are you on? I said, none. They said, according to this, you should be. So then they wanted to publish this thing in their monthly magazine about alcoholics. And this different kind of a psychiatric makeup they have based on this. And what would that be? It would be an affiliation, wouldn't it? So I said no. Of course, they didn't know what they were talking about. They're not like us. And no wonder the psychiatric profession has a hard time understanding us. How many people in here have gone to a psychiatrist and lied? Oh my God. No wonder they're screwed. And of course, as Bill says, the accumulation of money, property, and the unwanted personal authority so often guaranteed by personal wealth are serious hazards against which an AA group must be on guard against. Tradition 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Again, I've seen that happen in our group. When we have in Canada, when we have medallion nights, we have them every 5 years. I just had one for my 35th year. I delayed it a bit till November because I wanted my sons wanted to be there. And on your medallion night, you pick the speaker, you pick the people who will read, and you get a cake, and it's just your night. It's just for you. And a lot of family members come. And I noticed that some of them were putting money in the plate. That's an outside contribution, right? People don't think about that, but that's outside contribution. Self-supporting alcoholics. This makes us be self-supporting. Who ever heard of a self-supporting alcoholic? You know, I don't know about you, but I know. Today I know what my dependence is. I am absolutely and completely dependent on God, and that way I have utter and complete independence. But me and the alcoholics I sponsor, we've always had very dependent personalities. That's just part of who we are. Bill writes about that in Emotional Sobriety. I get very dependent. I used to get very dependent. And as regards being self-supporting through my own contributions, that was a foreign concept. You know, I had this feeling that I was just entitled to get all this free stuff. And if I didn't get it, I'd take it. So this is asking me to build character. It's also asking my group to be fully self-supporting, asking Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole to be fully self-supporting, so that nobody, no government, nobody can come and tell us what to do. What was it Rockefeller said? I think I wrote John Rockefeller. He said that money would spoil this thing. What an insight that was. Money will spoil this thing. He said, accepting donations would compromise the autonomy and independence and anonymity of our members. Genius. Thank you, Rockefeller. I know Bill didn't want to thank him at the time, but thank you, Rockefeller. Thank you. And thank you for me personally, because, you see, the development of character is what I've received in here. I didn't have character. I got character formation through being in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and applying these traditions to my life. So, you know, in this world, as someone said to me long ago when I was really, really down, he who holds the gold makes the rules. The piper plays the tune. We are a magnificent society within a society who are self-supporting through what we do. Traditionally, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centres may employ special workers. The biggest contention in the fellowship today is professionalism. A lot of people are wanting to professionalize Alcoholics Anonymous. If I'm not going to bring it to your attention too much. If you see it, then you'll know what I'm talking about and you'll be able to name it. The single purpose is defeated. Every time we've tried to professionalize a 12-step, the result has been exactly the same. Singleness of purpose. That of one alcoholic helping another alcoholic freely. We have bounty hunters in the rooms these days. I don't know if you know that, but there's bounty hunters. There's paid sponsorship. Paid sponsorship. And Bill just goes on here to talk. Perhaps the fear will always lurk in every AA heart that one day our name will be exploited by somebody for real cash. And I would say to you too that if somebody is coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and being asked for money when they come in the door, because it looks like they just drove up in a Cadillac or a Rolls or whatever it is, that person is slowly and gently being pushed back out the door again. I sponsor a lot of very wealthy women who it's been very, very hard for them to get sobriety because of how much, I'm talking a lot of money. Let them come to a safe place where money is not important. I like to think we're all one size when we come in here. All one size. And of course we do hire. We do hire people to work in our offices, etc. That's a totally different thing. How many people have sponsored somebody who at 4 weeks sobriety say they're going to be a counsellor? It has been my opinion and my experience that everybody who does that, but goes in and works in a treatment centre, they begin to say that every day they're doing their work for another alcoholic. But I point out to them they're being paid for it. And they stop coming to AA because now they're professionals. Now they're professionals. And they slowly slip away into the wide blue yonder. Many times I was asked to come and work in a treatment centre. I have no degrees. All I am is an alcoholic. I said, no, of course not. I was offered to come and speak at this big, there's a beautiful club in Toronto called the Granite Club. It's a millionaire-billionaire club. They asked me to come and speak a bunch of GMs, general managers, etc., for a fee. No. You do this for free and for fun. Come to an open meeting. Tradition 9. AA as such ought never be organised, but we may create service board or committees directly responsible to those they serve. Great suffering, but Bill wrote, great suffering and great love are AA's disciplinarians. We don't need any other. That's it. The people who are sitting in this room, I'm talking to the converted. Is there anybody in this room has any problem with the traditions? Just raise your hand. Absolutely nobody. Because we've all been beaten and humiliated into submission and the great love that we have for Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why. Right? It's the only way we learn. It's the only way we learn. It's the difference between that of vested authority or the spirit of service. And Bill said, did you ever hear of a nation, a church, or a political party, even a benevolent association, that had no membership rules? Every nation, in fact, every form of society has to have a government administered by human powers. AA's headquarters in New York. That's where we go. They don't have any authority either. You call them and ask them something. What does your group say? Or we really don't have any opinion on that? Unless each AA member follows the best of his ability or suggested 12 steps of recovery, he almost certainly signs his own death warrant. His drunkenness and dissolution are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from his personal disobedience to spiritual principles. The 12 traditions are spiritual principles. If I want to deviate from them, I'm immediately taking my steps out the door. Though Tradition 9 at first seems to deal with purely practical matters, its actual operation, it discloses a society within an organization, animated only by the spirit of service, a true fellowship. Tradition 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. And Bill said, never since the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous has it been divided by a major controversial issue. Thank God. Never. And yet I've gone to groups and heard political discussions going on. Anybody in here heard that? Oh, I forget I'm in America. Gets rather heated, doesn't it? Bill said, let us re-emphasize that this reluctance to fight one another or anybody else is not counted as some special virtue that makes us feel superior to other people. Nor does it mean that members of Alcoholics Anonymous are restored as citizens of the world, are going to back away from their individual responsibilities, to act as they see right upon the issues of our time. That's what it is. Personally, in my personal life, it's what I feel and what I support and what I can think will be the best for out there. In here, it's according to what you tell me. I can voice what I think, but it's according to what you tell me. The only tangible evidence for the Washingtonian movement left up until, I think, early 1900s, was a home for the fallen in Boston. 6 members or something. Because they didn't have any of these traditions. And our Tradition 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio and films. It's attraction, not promotion. And you know, when someone approaches me and tells me that they listen to my CD on YouTube, immediately it makes me feel different. Why am I on YouTube? I'm just a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It immediately creates a feeling of disunity. So if you know it, and not only that, the other thing is this. They get paid for each download. Or however many downloads. They get paid for that. So they're making money out of 12-step work, which is one alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic. And Bill says that, to soberly face the fact that being in the public eye is particularly hazardous for us. By temperament, nearly every one of us has been an irrepressible promoter. And the prospect of society composed almost entirely of promoters was frightening. Consider this explosive factor. We had to exercise self-restraint. And the early members, Lillian Roth, I'll cry tomorrow, she thought she was doing AA a good turn, and she identified as an alcoholic and ended up dying drunk in the gutter. We have all these movie stars today that are breaking their anonymity. For what? If they get drinking again, what does it mean to somebody who one day had thought about coming to AA? Anyway, it's Tradition 12 and I'll finish. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. What did Dr. Bob say? Love and service. We all know what love is. We all know what service is. It speaks to our personal anonymity. It speaks to not wanting to identify as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for whatever glory it might get you. Whoever thought you'd get glory out of being an alcoholic? You know, going to a New Year's party and just announcing to all, I'm a member. See how impressed they are by all of that, and probably saying, well, you bloody should be, in the early days, they wanted to shout about AA from the housetops, and some did. But it was plain that we could not be a secret society. And it is placing principles before personalities. And what are the principles? The principles are, again, what I've just gone over and what are reflected in the 12 traditions. Those are the principles. Those are the way that we're able to spread this fabulous, beautiful, God-given fellowship. I will never, ever take this deal for granted. Never. I've been given a gift of life, of self-respect, of being able to hold my head up. I never thought I could hold my head up ever again, the things that had happened to me because of my alcoholism. There's nothing more could happen to me. I know the dark places. Death would have been all right. I know the dark regions of being on the street. And believe you me, there's no hope there. And yet you offer me a hand, a free talk, a free cup of coffee, a place to come and get warm. You smile at me. You don't turn away in disgust. You don't sniff at me. Where in the world could I get that? I'm a chronic alcoholic. I never knew there was any hope. So, you ask me, I've got to do a few simple things and stay out of myself for the traditions and do 12 steps and I'll get a change of personality and I won't have to drink this horrible stuff. It's killing me and yet I can't stop drinking. All right. I'll honor you. I'll do your spiritual foundation. And Bill just said to finish, these experiences taught us that anonymity is real humility at work. It is an all-pervading spiritual quality which today keynotes AA life everywhere. Moved by the spirit of anonymity, we try to give up our natural desires for personal distinction. We are sure that humility expressed by anonymity is the greatest safeguard that Alcoholics Anonymous can ever have. And thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day. Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
I am Bill Smith. I am an alcoholic. I'm sober through the grace of God and the fellowship of this program. And Rick and I, of all people, we know there's a God because we just drove down from Las Vegas with Bob Darrell. Boy, he talks a lot better than he drives, I can tell you that. tell you another story about him and I years ago, but I won't get into that. What I want to do is I really want to welcome the new people, and maybe you're here for 2 or 3 years and you still got this big hole in your gut like I had. I'd like to welcome you to and just say, stay here, keep doing this deal, and you'll transfer the head to the heart. Sometimes that's a long trip for some of us. For me, it was a long, long trip, a lot of years to get it to come from here to here, because I never understood alcoholism. And in a room this size, if I can make a difference in 2 or 3 people's lives, or one person's life, it would be worth the trip. Because I hope someday one of you guys will make a difference in my daughter. So I can help your kids, I just can't help mine, And so my sponsor said, go help other people's kids, and somebody else send somebody to help your kid. And that's what we do here, And so when I look at people in detox and stuff, I don't look at it like just people. There's somebody's son, there's somebody's daughter, somebody's brother, and that's what we are here. We're not just faces. We're people who live every day with the most deadliest disease on the face of the earth, and I didn't understand that. And everybody don't have what I have, and my story's a little bit different than some people's. I was raised right. I really was. I just turned left, I got 3 brothers that, that just excelled at school and everything. And my mom, she used to think it was funny. I didn't. She'd go, I got 3 sons and him, and I always felt out of place. And, the big book talks about a guy who does pretty good if he don't drink. And I do. I do pretty good if I don't drink. I go to work. I mean, things are pretty good for me. Really are. I come out of the chute a little bit irritable and restless and discontent. I've always been like that, and I've been wound tight most of my life. And after 28 years in AA, I'm still wound sort of tight. But I don't know, I was like 15 or 16, something like that. I must have been 16 because I was driving this little old car, and I was at this bootlegger's house. I'm from North Carolina. And this guy had a daughter there, and she had what I wanted. And I was willing to go to any lengths to get it except talk to her. And I was standing over there staring like I do, and I wonder if she'd like to get lucky. And I don't know, somebody handed me a glass of that white whiskey, and I heard a guy from the podium say on his first drink that he could feel the back of his hair stand up and his fingernail grow and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, you ought to drink white whiskey. It don't do that. But what happened was, in a period of time, 20 minutes or whatever it was, for the first time in my life, my skin fit. I was okay. And now whatever's in that glass was great, because about 20 minutes later she was in my car, so whatever's in there I needed. And but I didn't know that I had alcoholism, and I didn't know that was part of it. Silkworth talks about that we drink for cause and effect, and I was just in North Carolina, and we did a Silkworth thing with another friend, and he said that's what makes the difference, and that is part of it. But there's more to alcoholism than that. There's a lot more to it now. What Silkworth is talking about is an allergy to the body, and that's part of alcoholism, and I didn't know that. Once I pick up a drink, I heard a guy say, I don't know what's going to happen. I know exactly what's going to happen when I pick up a drink. I'm going to have another drink. And I get to where I'm dancing, I'm having a really good time. You know what I mean? I am cooking. I'm out there just boogalooing and mashed potato and do it all. I never took a dance lesson in my life, but I can dance when I'm drunk, boy. I mean, I can get it on, And then I do something that other people don't do, right? They'll just keep dancing, have a drink. No, I'm having fun. I'll have another one, And the same guy, and what I do is I drink right on past that. And later on I'm passed out because I can't stop it. I get her picked out, and, I got the white picket fence all built and 2 little kids running around. I don't know her name yet, but I got it all planned up here in my head, and I drank right past it, and I didn't understand that. And I had that from the start. Once I pick up a drink, I cannot control how much I drink. And Silkworth says that there's all different types of manic depressive. There's a guy that does really good, when he doesn't drink. But we all have one thing in common. And this puts us in a different entity, he says. And that's that once he picks it up, this phenomenal craving develops. and he cannot control how much he drinks. And I never tried to quit drinking. I just joined the Navy to see the world and became a drunk. Just the way it is. You can do a lot. I'm not going to give you a long thing. I'm going to tell you some of the things. But when I was in the Navy, I was in Long Beach, California. I still remember this, and it's always, I don't know why this is so important to me, but every time I talk, I think of this. Because I was like 19 years old, and you have to be 21 to drink in California, but they never asked me how old I was. You know, I don't know if I looked like I needed a drink or just, you know, I didn't go in to bother anybody anyway. I went in to drink. I bothered people after I got drunk, but when at first, I just go in to drink. I drink. You know, there was a lady that worked with me in Las Vegas, and she said, you know, him and I drank in the same bar. He never said hello to me. I always intended to say hello to her because she was really a good-looking gal. But when I'd get ready to say hello, I was so drunk that I couldn't get from my stool to hers, you know, so I never got it on. But we drank in the same place, me and Fran, and I was in Long Beach, and there used to be an old thing down there called the Pike. I don't even know if it's there anymore or not, but, you know, that's where I hung out up at that Saratoga bar, and really nice place. And I got too drunk to go back to the ship, so I passed out in that park across the street. And I woke up, and it's not like Las Vegas. The bars wouldn't open. And I was I'm 19 years old, and I'm standing outside that bar with all them old guys waiting for that bar open. You know what I mean? 35 and 40 years old. When you're 19, 40 is old. 40 is a kid now, but not then. And they're out there shaking like this, and we go inside, and I still remember it sort of like this. I'm telling you the best I can remember. I would never try to lie from up here, or I try to impress you, because I don't want to do that, because we die of this thing every day, and I know that. But I remember these guys in there, and I remember I just told that guy I had folded money. These guys most of them had change and a little bit of money, not much. And, I said, hit this shot glass 2 or 3 times with a short beer bag to get my heart started, you know. Then I'm watching these guys, and he would pour theirs in an old-fashioned glass or a regular tall glass so they wouldn't spill it, so they could get it up. And I'm sitting there giving them a lecture. Look what you're doing to yourself, for Christ's sake. You know. Come hell, can't you see what this crap has done to you? What are you, nuts? I mean, God, look at you, guy. You know, and the guy's going like, leave me alone, you know, and he's trying to get the dang thing down, get 3 or 4 so he could go like that, right? You know. And in less than 10 years, before I was even 30, I would be the guy in Las Vegas going like that, trying to get it down, you know. And isn't it amazing that the alcoholic mind has the ability not to give you the picture? You see, I can see what's happening to you. I have no idea what's happening to me, not the slightest. I didn't have the slightest idea that I was in for another 21 years of just absolutely insane trying to change my life and not being able to. The alcoholic mind has the ability. If you come in and take a picture, I'm sitting right in the middle of it. And I tell you something, I've watched my daughter. I know that she can't see the picture, and I don't even try to explain it to her because nobody could explain it to me. I just had to run its course, and I was arrested 11 times while I was in service. A lot of things you can do in the Navy, but you can't miss the boat. I was in Iwakuni, Japan. They had the 2 things I liked. They had to have the houses with the whiskey and the girls in them, and you don't have to talk. Just put your money up and drink and do your thing. And I did too much of both, I guess. And anyway, I woke up and the ship was gone. And they put me on a Air Force crash boat to catch the ship, and I remember coming up, and they said, the old man wants to see you. And I made a plan to stay in service because I knew guys like me would have a little trouble outside. That's all I'm thinking. I'm going to have trouble if I get out. And so I was going to make a career of the Navy, and they took all my stripes. So I told them what they could do with the Navy. And the day I got out of the Navy, they gave me a bunch of mustering out money, so I called my mom and dad and said, I'm coming home to Florida. But you can't put money in my pocket and expect me to arrive someplace when I tell you I'm going to be there. You know, and I did arrive in Florida 46 days later through a place called Chester, Illinois, and don't ask me why I went there. And, and that's my life. I just pick up a drink and I'm long gone. And I never tried to quit. I got burnt out in Florida. I got a good job at General Electric, and if you miss 5 days with them, they fire you. I missed 28. They wouldn't fire me, so I just quit. 9 to 5 didn't thrill me. I was just like nothing. Every time I'd get something, it seemed like that was it. And after I got it, that ain't it. Then I get something else, and she's it, and get her, that ain't it. You know, and I get a job, and that ain't it. And I want to work on a commercial fishing boat. I thought, dang, this is it. You know, they're all drunks. And I said, man, I can handle this. And they were. That's what they were. They were drunks. They weren't alcoholics. They fired me. They kept all the drunks and fired me. You know, I come to work, want to tell them how to run the fish company. I don't guess they appreciate it, you know. And went in one time, I told my mom, I said, my mother loved me. I was her firstborn. She loved me more than anything in the world. And I told my mom, I said, I'm going to Las Vegas. And she says, we'll help you pack. I'm about 27 or 28, and she said, we don't know what to do for you, and I'm thinking a couple hundred would help. You know, and showed up in Las Vegas, and I wound up very short time getting a job at $1 an hour. Let me tell you about my brothers. I just got back from North Carolina last Saturday. My brother has a home on Carolina Beach, on Kern Beach, a 3-story on the beach. You sit on the porch, and there's the water. He just retired from Shipping Chemicals. I don't know how much money they gave him, but it's a ton. My other brother owns his own company. It's a small company now, but at one time it wasn't. And my other brother put the airports in for the government. And at the age of 17, I'm standing in front of my first judge because I'm an alcoholic and they're not. And I wound up on Fremont Street and had everything in my carnation box, walking down Fremont Street. I lived at the Six and Carson Hotel. If you ever go there, go look at it. I drive by it all the time, remind myself where I used to live. And when I say I was homeless, I'm not homeless all the time. I would get a cheap motel for a while, or I would sleep on somebody's couch for a while. But I spent a bigger part of 2 years. Got a job at a shill. That's the guy that starts a game making $1 an hour, and thought I made a score. And guys, when I went to work for him, they always liked me. When you first met me, you liked me. I don't know what that was. After you knew me for a week or two, you wasn't sure. And after 2 weeks or more, you just couldn't stand me because I would use and abuse you. And I don't mean to do that. And everybody took it personal. It's not personal. You know, I used to tell my mom, you know, it's not personal, you know. And, all the other boys would pay the rent. They charged my mother, they paid my mom $15, so that's room, food, and everything. And I'd be borrowing it every week. I borrowed it, and she was so easy. It was always like, honey, you know, you need to straighten out, and all the time she's reaching for a purse, you know, I like to tell you, I felt bad doing that, but I didn't. I needed it. I had to have it. It ain't like I'm feeling bad. I mean, it's nothing personal, you know. God, everybody takes it personal, you know, and like, you owe me money. Oh, sure, I owe everybody, you know. And I wound up on the street, and I met this lady, and she was my Eskimo, and she still is. It's my ex-wife. Bob and all these guys know that I've been divorced almost 20 years. I mow the yard. There's nothing that she wants that I don't do. Nothing. She's allowed anything she wants, because she was the one that, for the first time in my life, this is the second phase of alcoholism. I made up my mind, wound up at a little Church of the West. I don't know how it happened, but I wound up married. She had 4 things I needed. She had an apartment and a car and a couple more things. And beautiful cocktail waitress. And I fell in love with her after I married her. Not when I married her. I just wound up married. And that happens in Vegas. You know, I woke up and there she is. And I started straightening out. First time in my life, I tried to start getting my life together. And I went into a hospital down in Santa Barbara. Her hotel put me down. I don't remember how many days I was in the hospital, but the doctor sitting on the side of my bed telling me if I drank any more, I was going to die. My liver is swollen up and everything is starting to quit on me. I'm the kind of guy, once I start drinking, I don't eat. And just everything started quitting. And so I came back from Las Vegas, and I did exactly what I said I'd do. I'm on my way back. I said, okay, enough's enough. And I always thought I was unique until I've been reading the book lately. I don't know, and I've studied the book now more than I did the first 10 years I was in AA. And there's a lot of good stories in there about Jim, the car salesman, the guy with 25 years. He did really good in business. He even said he was happy. But he didn't drink nothing for 25 years. And I didn't drink for 7 years. I'm a little bit wound. I think I'm more like Jim. Jim said he was a little bit irritable because he was working for a company he used to own. That would sort of piss me off, But the day he picked up that drink, I got to remember that. He had a sandwich and a glass of milk, and he's not even thinking about drinking. He's just having a sandwich and a glass of milk. He's in to sell a car. And because he knows he can sell a car there. He's not thinking about drinking or nothing. And this is the thing about alcoholism I can never understand until... And then all of a sudden, with the second sandwich and a glass of milk, just putting a shot on the full stomach. Well, that makes sense, right? But he doesn't realize, and I don't realize, that I have an allergy. And once I pick up the drink, I must have another drink. In less than no time, he's back in the asylum again. But the other guy, he hadn't had a drink for 25 years. And it's not